Hello students, today we're going to look at solving equations part 2. Okay, so today's big topic is having variables on both sides, and when I say both sides I mean both sides of the equal sign. So we're looking at variables on both sides of the equal sign and how do we solve an equation that has those. So the first thing I notice is I've got 5x minus 3 equals 2x plus 12. Okay, so I've got some x's on the left hand side and I've got some x's on the right hand side. My strong recommendation to you is to always start with the variable with the smallest coefficient. What's a coefficient? I'm going to write this over on the side. Coefficient. Okay? The coefficient of a variable is the number in front of the variable. Okay? A coefficient is the number in front of the variable. In this 5x, the coefficient is 5. And in the 2x, the coefficient is 2. We call it a coefficient. I'll say that a lot. Okay? So I'm looking with for the variable with the smallest coefficient. So I've got 5x and 2x. The one with the smallest coefficient is 2x. So I'm going to start with that. And then I ask myself, what kind of number is that? And I say, oh, it's a positive number. Well, what's the opposite of positive? Negative. So I need to subtract, and remember negative and subtract are kind of the same. I subtract 2x from both sides. Because remember the rule is whatever I do to one side of an equation, I have to do to the other. Okay? So my goal is getting all of the x's or all of the variables on one side. That's why I subtracted from here to get rid of them over here and move them here. So 5x minus 2x is 3x minus 3 equals 12. Because those two x's become a 0, but we don't need to write down the 0. So I've got 3x minus 3 equals 12. Now I'm in a two-step equation. I could stop here because I know you're really good at two-step equations, but I'll just finish it for fun. So I add 3 to both sides, and I get 3x equals 15. Divide by 3, divide by 3, x equals 5. To check it, I always want to plug it back into the original equation. If x equals 5, 5 times 5 is 25, and 25 minus 3 is 22. And so I do 5 times 2 is 10, and 10 plus 12 is 22. And 22 equals 22, so x equals 5. So here's our next example. I've got 2x minus 3 equals 15 minus 4x. Okay? So, again, I've got a variable on each side of the equal sign, so I want to start with the number with the smallest coefficient, the variable with the smallest coefficient. So I have 2x and negative 4x. Ooh, did you hear me say negative 4x? The coefficient of this x is negative 4 because that subtraction sign acts as a negative and as a minus sign, both back and forth, it's the same, okay? So I've got 2x and negative 4x. Well, which one is the smallest coefficient? The smallest coefficient is negative 4 because negative 4 is less than 2. So I'm going to do the opposite. What is the opposite of minus 4x? Plus 4x. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. Okay? So 2x plus 4x is 6x minus 3 equals 15. Because those add up to 0 and we don't need to write down the 0. So 6x minus 3 equals 15. I'm back to a two-step equation. I add 3 to both sides. 6x equals 18. Divide by 6 on both sides. X equals 3. Bam. And here's the next example. 12 minus 5x equals 15 minus 8x. And that's a mark on the board. That's not a part of the equation. Okay? So, I've got 12 minus 5x, 15 minus 8x. I have a variable on both sides. Which one is the variable with the smallest coefficient? Negative 8. Because negative 8 is smaller than negative 5. So I'm going to start with negative 8. So I've got minus 8x, so the opposite of that is plus 8x to both sides. And so I have 12 plus 3x. Because negative 5 plus 8 is positive 3. Oh, be careful with those negatives. Equals 15. Okay? So now, again, I'm back at a two-step equation. I subtract 12 from both sides, and I get 3x equals 3. divide by 3, so x equals 1. So now we're going to do an equation that kind of adds everything that we've done in this contract, okay? So I've got distributive property and I've got variables on both sides. So I have 5 plus 2 times the quantity of k plus 4 equals 5 times the quantity of k minus 3 plus 10, okay? So the first thing we have to do on both sides is to use the distributive property, okay? So 5 is coming down because I'm not doing anything with it yet. 2 times k is positive 2k, and 2 times 4 is positive 8. Whatever the sign is, when you multiply those is what goes between. You've got to have a sign between them. Equals 5 times k is 5k, and 5 times negative 3 is negative 15 plus 10. Now, before I go on, I have to combine like terms. You don't want to go any farther until you combine all of the like terms so that I get one variable and one constant on one side and another variable and another constant on the other side. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is combine like terms on the left-hand side, which would be 5 plus 8, and that's 13 plus 2k, equals, I've got negative 15 plus 10, which is negative 5, so that's going to be 5k minus 5. So now I have solving an equation with variables on both sides. So I look and see which one is the variable with the smallest coefficient, a 2k or a 5k, and so obviously 2k is smaller, so I'm going to start there. I'm adding 2k in the equation, so the opposite of that is subtracting 2k. So I'm left with 13 equals 3k minus 5. Okay? So good so far? Now, add 5 to both sides. Back to this two-step equation. So I've got 13 plus 5 is 18 equals 3x. Divide both sides by 3. X equals 6. Bam. A lot of steps. And I need you to follow each step and write it down just like you would. I know some of you like to do things in your head, but when you have this many steps in it, I really need to see what you're doing, and you need to see what you're doing so you don't forget anything. I'll leave you with wise words of wisdom from Mr. Cohen's. When you're solving equations, be organized and methodical. You keep yourself organized, you form a nice V in the equation, and you get the answer the first time instead of trying to do too many things at one time and making mistakes you have to go back and fix. Those are wise words of wisdom from Mr. Cohen's.